Something that also happened the past week was one of my favorite filmmakers, or a filmmaker who inspired one of the filmmakers I find to be one of the biggest inspirations, died at age 89. His name was Marcel Ophuls. Who's French Jewish filmmaker. His family fled the Nazis and wound up in Hollywood. His father was a filmmaker as well. He made one film called Hotel Terminus about Klaus Barbie, who was a Nazi torturer who was then hired by the CIA and used in Operation Condor throughout South America, working for the Bolivian fascist regime, Chile, Paraguay, to torture communists. He had honed his skills torturing communists in Europe. And Ophüls followed him all around South America, trying to basically hunt him down for an interview. It's a 5-hour-long documentary, but it's just like for 5 hours, you have to sit with the fact that the U.S. rehabilitated Nazi torturers. And his most famous film is The Sorrow and the Pity, which is about the French resistance in World War II. And we would always hear about how the French valiantly fought under de Gaulle and fought the Nazis and had this brilliant guerrilla resistance. And what Ophüls illustrated through his film was that the French actually were pretty content in many places, especially at the elite level with Nazi occupation. French resistance fighters were isolated. They were pariahs in many cases. They were hated. They were considered a nuisance. They were not supported broadly by French society. And French society, because of its hatred of communism or hatred of Jews, would just participate in Vichy occupation. And the film never made it to the French theaters, the famous theaters in Paris. It was basically soft banned. There were just a few small houses that would show it. There was fierce backlash for Ophüls, and the film became famous over the next decades in the United States, because we're not French. But I mean, I think about the people protesting Gaza now, or the actionists in the UK, the Filton 18 with Palestine Action, who are still in jail, all of the journalists who've been detained, Asa Winstanley, Richard Medhurst, people who are being deported in the US under orders of Zionist fanatic organizations, the demonization of protesters on campuses, and the generally apathetic attitude of most Americans to the Holocaust of our time, and especially the role of the Western corporate media in drumming up support and manufacturing support for this genocide with all the lies early on. And now they're doing a form of manufacturing support through omission, just not showing charred babies. This is the same thing morally to me. They're Nazi collaborators at the elite level. And our government, of course, it's not just Randy Fine, this disgusting ogre figure who's paid by AIPAC in Congress to call for nuking Gaza, but all the members of Congress who just go along and quietly vote for the appropriations to send weapons to Israel. The U.S. has just sent hundreds of tons of weapons to Israel. This is Nazi collaboration in modern form, and most people aren't talking about it. We are fairly isolated, but at the same time, the tide is turning in public opinion. Most Americans under 35, vast majority, are just not on board with this, but there's nowhere for them to go, and there's no leadership to mobilize them. So, we're in the woods, we're in the wilderness. It really does remind me of the period described in The Sorrow and the Pity. And while much of the American public might not be emotionally on Israel's side, there's this enforced apathy here where they're just not hearing about it, and all the calls to end this are being drowned out so that there can't be the kind of pressure that we need to see on our government.
Well, one factor as well is coercion and intimidation from the Trump administration. I mean, look at this headline from Politico. Trump team pauses new student visa interviews as it weighs expanding social media vetting. So now, if you want to get a student visa, the interview process has been paused around the world. And there's a new order out from the Trump administration, which basically says that before even an interview, there's going to be social media vetting, including for so-called anti-Semitism. I mean, what that means? That means for criticizing Israel. But some good news to report, because in a bleak time, you mentioned Asa Winstanley, the British journalist
Yeah.
at the LGBT Intifada. His home was raided, and his devices were seized. Well, a British court has just ruled that was done unlawfully, and has ordered the return of all of his devices, which he actually got back today. So it's at least one small piece of good news in a very grim time.
Yeah. I've also seen this story. Yeah, that is good news. And we need to clear Kit Clarenberg's name as well, who also faced the same kind of treatment from British counter-terror police when he returned home. As our colleague at the Grayzone. We need to see Richard Medhurst cleared. We need to see the terrorism charges dropped against the Filton 18 from Palestine Action. And we have a piece going up shortly at the Grayzone, which outlines showing internal, mostly redacted emails between the British Crown Prosecution Service and the Israeli embassy, that the Israeli government has been lobbying successfully the British government, the Attorney General's office, to enhance charges against British citizens protesting this genocide, as well as advising Israeli officials on how to avoid arrest warrants. And I assume that the Israeli pressure has also led to these raids on Asa Winstanley, Sarah Wilkinson, the attack on Richard Medhurst. So we're looking at one of the biggest foreign influence scandals in recent times. Again, only alternative media is reporting on it. And here's a story closer to home. Trump administration wants to photograph everyone leaving the U.S. by car. This has been justified by Marco Rubio as trying to prevent student protesters who are here on visas or with permanent residency, green cards, from getting out. I mean, even this has a Palestine angle. It's complete insanity. And it is, Aaron, as you said, the intimidation factor. They're trying to intimidate people into silence on this genocide, which I think will only lead people into some into more radical modalities.